are here to celebrate moms. Moms are amazing. I don't know if you knew this, but today across our country, we're going to spend about $23.1 billion to celebrate mom. It's about the total annual budget of the state of North Carolina, all in one day. I guess that tells you something. Moms really are special. I don't think you've ever seen an NFL lineman pull up his sleeve and it said, Dad, right? Moms are something special. While dads are loved, moms are often adored. They are, for us, the molder of dreams. So today we celebrate moms both here, across the country, and around the world for all the special things that they do. We celebrate those that have the heart of a mother. While some are not biological moms, we do have some moms who are foster moms. We have some moms who adopt. And it's a celebration of those who exhibit that heart of a mom. I also understand today that we don't all celebrate moms the same way or Mother's Day the same way. For some, this may be a very difficult day for you. I have pictures of my mom up on the screen today, and with myself and my sister. And I do that because I can't call my mom later. I can't visit her later. My mom passed away when I was 15 years old. I can celebrate her memory, but for some, this may be very difficult for you. There may be some sitting in here who have a child that preceded and have passed away for whatever reason. There are some that sit in here that wish they were a mom, but for whatever reason in God's design, they've not been able to do that. So we know that it may be difficult for some, but we can celebrate the great things that moms represent to us. And I want to take just a moment before we read our passage just to pray and pray over our moms and celebrate them together, if you would join me. Father, we thank you for every mother that is sitting in this room, for every mom that is represented by others that are sitting in this room. Lord, there are memories, there are things that they have done, there are things that they have said, God, that have made us who we are today, and we celebrate them. Father, we ask that you would give a special blessing over each one of them. Father, in your own creative way, would you give them exactly what they need today, whether it's a hug, a word of encouragement, maybe just something for them alone maybe in their Bible reading or whatever it might be. God, would you bless them in the way that they need it? Would you give them a vision for the future, for their family? Would you give some encouragement to continue? And for those who are tired, would you give them rest? Father, we just ask that you would help us as we think about moms today, as we celebrate them. Lord, that you would help us to do that. Help us to see them the way you do. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Today I want to introduce you to a young man in the Bible who would make any mom proud. He's probably, or she is probably no different than any of the moms sitting in this room. She was not an author that you would find on the New York Times bestseller list. She wasn't a traveling speaker. She was just mom. She did all the right things for her kids. She loved them and she was faithful. And in the midst of chaos, she learned the things that were most important for her son. As I look at the life of Timothy, the young man that we're speaking of, I see scattered throughout the Bible little pieces of who he was and what he was appreciated for. For example, we can see his respect for adults. We can see a healthy personal relationship that he had with those in his area of where he lived. We can see his passion for God. We can see a willingness to take personal risk to follow him. Timothy was the product of many years of investment of a good mom, quietly in the background, just doing the things that she could do to help her son discover the reality of God. We celebrate the heart of a mom. The passage I want to read to you this morning is just 3 verses, and it's found in the book of 2 Timothy, chapter number 1. And it's verses 3 through 5. And the Apostle Paul is writing this letter to Timothy, a young man, a young pastor, probably unproven in many ways, but yet admired by the Apostle Paul and many others that you would find in the churches that Timothy was ministering in. Somehow, this young man had lifted above the others, And he was admired by the adults and appreciated even by the Apostle Paul. And this is what Paul said, starting in verse number 3. He said, I thank God, whom I serve from my forefathers with a pure conscience, that without ceasing I have remembrance of thee in my prayers night and day, greatly desiring to see thee, being mindful of thy tears, that I may be filled with joy. When I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in thee, which first dwelt in thy grandmother Lois and in thy mother Eunice, and I am persuaded that in thee also. Most theologians believe this young man, Timothy, to be 17 years old when he began the whole process of leading some of the most notable churches in his area at that time. And the Apostle Paul, the premier follower of Christ, the one who was setting the pace, the one who had his hands on writing the majority of the New Testament, has taken special interest in this young man. And some of the things that I see him saying that are most notable here in verse number 3, and I'm going to put these in my own words. He says, I think of you, Paul saying to Timothy, this young man, I think of you often and I am praying for you regularly. There was something special about Timothy that the Apostle Paul noticed, and he has now taken this special interest with all of the people that Paul could invest in. Timothy was in the center of all of that. Verse number 4, in my words, Paul says to Timothy, I would love to sit with you over coffee and just talk. This is what he said to him actually. He says, greatly desiring to see you. Paul was saying, I don't just want to remember who you are. I want to sit down and spend some time together. And then in verse number 5, he says, I see a genuine passion for God in you and in your lifestyle. Timothy, being this young man, has somebody of great interest. An older person who notices the reality of his faith and his desire to follow God. It actually goes just a touch further than that, because at the end of his life, the Apostle Paul, when he had finally kind of raised the white flag and said, I think my final days are now here, Paul asked for one person in particular to come visit him in prison. And he wrote in his note to Timothy, in the end of the same book that we're in chapter number 4, he says, do thy diligence to come shortly unto me, for Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. Only Luke is with me. Take Mark and bring him with thee, for he is profitable unto me for the ministry. The cloak that I left at Troas with Carpus bring with thee when thou comest, and the books, but especially the parchments. Paul has a special request. He knows that his days are numbered, and in that, he looks at Timothy and writes this letter and says, hey, I have a special favor. I would love to spend a day with you before I pass. Timothy, in this journey, would have to travel some 4,500 miles. He would have to collect the things that the Apostle Paul needed, a coat, some books, and especially some copies of the Bible. But he knew in his mind that if there was one person he could trust, if there was one person he could count on to come through for him in this difficulty, it would be this young man, Timothy. In recognizing the character and the integrity of Timothy, we have a tribute to his mother, Eunice. She overcame the challenges that she faced. Many believe her to even be a single mother. Timothy's dad is mentioned in the book of Acts, but he's an unbeliever, and he wasn't following Christ. And some believe that Timothy even could have been living without a father in his life at this point. And Eunice, facing the struggles of living in a metropolitan city and not having a father to give the support or a husband to give the support, Eunice was a woman of faith who knew that she could do what she could, and that everything that she did in the secret and in the sunlight would be something to invest in the life of her young son. So the three words that will reveal three principles out of the passage this morning that I want to bring to us as we sit on the front row of Eunice's life to look at what did she do to bring up a young man that would be so recognized and so admired and so respected by the leading leaders of the Christian world. So here's our first word found in verse number 5. It's the word unfeigned. And Paul wrote it this way. He says, when I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in thee. Unfeigned is really a word that we don't use much anymore. It carries the idea as an adjective. It's kind of the idea of being real, being genuine, or being sincere, regardless of the circumstances. Eunice understood that the importance in her life of living the same, whether the doors of the house were closed or whether she was at the public market with young Timothy. Her life was showing the genuineness of knowing Jesus. This just tells us that the heart of a mom respects the mundane. I didn't say that moms love the mundane. No one does. But the heart of a mom respects the mundane. The long hours of answering the same question over and over again. Or maybe those times when you say, if I have to change one more diaper, if I have to cook one more meal, if I have to clean up the kitchen one more time. It's the mundane things that really can reveal the genuineness of our faith in God. And for Eunice, she was successful at doing that. Timothy saw that in her life. Listen, we all know that a mom faces the chaos that can rival the CEO of any Fortune 500 company. Mom can be cooking a meal while making a phone call to the doctor with a child tugging on her pant leg, asking a question with screaming coming from the other room. It's a crazy thing what moms can do. You could probably take a mom, the average mom sitting in here, blindfold her, put her in the middle of Wegmans with a husband and release them both at the same time, and she will find the baked beans before the husband would. That's the things that a mom can do. If we weighed the crumbs that the average mom sweeps up in her kitchen on any given year, she probably could single-handedly solve world hunger. But that's what moms are all about. When I was younger and my mom would really prepare us for Christmas, she loved the Christmas season. My mom lived in the upstairs room. We had 2 rooms downstairs of a Cape Cod. And my mom had a great way of building our anticipation. And on Christmas Eve, there was a couple things under the tree, but when Christmas morning came, something magically happened where gifts appeared. And most of the time, the gifts that appeared overnight were not wrapped because, well, they came from Santa Claus. And so I remember my sister and I, we would wake up 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning, and we would converge at the entrance of our door, which opened into the living room. We were no more than 15 feet from the Christmas tree, and we had our pattern, and we tiptoed out there when all of a sudden a voice from heaven would say, "Go back to bed." Whoa. Surprising. We'd look at each other and think, how did she hear us? We were tiptoeing. But our mom had bionic listening. It was an amazing thing what she could do. Mom has the unparalleled stress of being a chef, a banker, an Uber driver, a nurse, a mathematician, a sanitation engineer, a counselor, a seamstress, a clothing expert, a dietitian. And if being a mother was a paid position, we as fathers could have retired from our job after child number 1 and started fishing for the rest of our lives. But we know that that's not true. The heart of a mom understands and can live in the life of the mundane. Young Timothy had a mom that was aware of that. Living in the midst of the responsibilities as what we would say as a single mom, Eunice understood the importance of each moment as an investment in the life of her young son. The heart of a mom respects the mundane. You know, sometimes I think Facebook categorizes moms into two different ways. First, there's the mom that has everything together. Every picture is perfect. The children are doing the right thing, and it's a brag session on how good everything is going at home and how good they have it. And then the other side of the mama coin is the mom who is frayed and falling apart and describes every failure and every problem of the house, but then just finishes it off with the hashtag, keeping it real. And I want you to know that when we talk about Eunice having a genuine faith and being real, it's the idea that no matter what the situation was, her faith determined her response. And what she understood was that every response, everything that she was doing was an opportunity to show the reality of Jesus. Jesus mentioned one lady in particular in the book of Mark, and he said, wherever the gospel is preached, he said, she will be remembered from now till eternity. And this is what he said about her. He said in her defense, when people were criticizing her, he said, leave her alone, for she has done what she could. And sometimes I think we may lift people up in position too high. And maybe our expectations of our mom is too much. And God says, listen, Mom, all I want you to do is what you can. I want you to do what you can. To be able to go to bed at night and say, I don't know that I did everything, but I did what I could. And Eunice understood the value of doing exactly that, just what she could. My mom was a single mom for 13 years of my life. And when I say single, it was just her and us living in the house. And my mom never let us feel like it was a non-desirable or a bad way to live. My mom learned how to have fun with us. I remember one Christmas and preparing for it, we had an uncle that was a crazy person. My Uncle Bob, when I say crazy, he was just funny. He was a goofball. He had us laughing all the time. And so one Christmas, in preparation, every night at dinner time, when dinner was done, my mom pulled out a box. She put it on the table. And it was a 1,000-piece puzzle. And Mom had my sister Corey and I, every night, wrap individual puzzle pieces in Christmas wrapping and put them back in that box. And we gave that as a gift to our Uncle Bob for Christmas. Uncle Bob really didn't appreciate it as much as we did, and he gave it back to my mom as a gift the next year. So then we returned it to his wife, my Aunt Pat, and said, here, this is for your house. But Mom helped us to have fun. She understood that some things are mundane, some things are not the way you would plan it, some things are not the way you'd want it, but we can live within that. And Eunice understood the value of all of that. And a mama's legacy is reflected in the everyday choices that we make. Eunice will always be remembered for one having a genuine love for God. You know, over the last month or so, we gave an opportunity for people to give a little bit of insight into maybe a little bit about their mom. So I have some of them here, and I'm going to read just a few of these, some memories of Mom. So let me just give you a few of these from you guys. If my mom had a goal, she met it. She even went back to college to finish her associate's degree in her 50s. It's a good memory, something good about Mom. 33 years later, my mom is still my best friend and my biggest supporter. My mom was like a living GPS. Now, I know some that, forget it. This is a positive thing. I always felt that my mom was a great listener. This is a teenager. He wrote, if I had one word to describe my mom, it would be forgiving. Mom has a heart to give to those in need, never expecting anything in return. I remember Mom for her ability to listen. My mom has the gift of contentment. Well, we could go on and cover so many more of these, but to understand that all of us in our experiences with Mom, a lot of times the greatest memories that we have come from those times of things being mundane and just we're living life. But the reality is for moms, those are some of the greatest times to reveal the genuineness of their faith. Here's the second word. The second word that we have to pull out of our text in verse number 5 again is the word faith. And Paul had said in regards to Timothy's faith, which was the same as his mother's faith, he said, when I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in you. This thing of faith points to the quality of being godly. Faith is a persuasion or an explicit trust in somebody. It's an unshakable confidence in the reality of God and in the promises of God. Eunice, Timothy's mother, exemplified this very thing to her son. She was a godly example. This shows that the heart of a mom values the shadows. In speaking of Timothy, Paul was recognizing the genuine faith, that it wasn't something that he or his mom did on Sundays only. It was something that was an everyday thing, an everyday part of their lives and their experience. You know, I believe that the strength of the faith of Eunice can be seen in a well-worn, well-marked Bible that the kids can see. I believe that it can be found in a regular and ongoing time of prayer. I think that one of the things that Eunice did in the reality of who she was is she prayed often. And I think that Timothy could see in his mom someone when she prayed, it was comfortable. It was just talking to another friend, because that's the kind of genuineness that this word faith is speaking of. And Timothy saw the reality of that, and he desired to have the same thing. He desired to see that. I remember my wife and I spending a dinner with another couple in leadership going back a number of years, and we had dinner with them, and then we went into the living room to sit, and we had some conversation there. And after a few minutes, they had said, hey, how about if we pray about, what God's doing in the ministry, what we'd like to see him do? And I thought, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And they proceeded as a couple to get down on their knees at the couch. And I thought, okay, so we did the same thing. It was great. I just didn't know we were doing that. And I remember sitting there praying. And one of the things I could hear was the kids coming down the steps. Not mine, their kids coming down the steps. And I thought, we're going to be disrupted. Or something's going to... And I remember, I think they actually had to step through our legs as they were in the walkway, and they just kind of went on their way and did their thing. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's interesting. Mom and Dad must do this regularly for the kids not to sit there and go, what happened? What's going on? They didn't ask a question. They just kind of assumed that was just a regular thing for Mom and Dad. But the second thing that hit me immediately is, what would my kids say? I wonder if my kids would sit there and say, hey, did someone die? What happened? What's going on? But for them, it was a regular part of what they did as a husband and wife. I think that's what we're speaking of when we think of Eunice. It is a regular part. Timothy saw this in the life of his mother as something of faith, her belief in God, and it wasn't just a Sunday thing. She celebrated God every day. Mothers have the privilege and responsibility to pray for their children. I don't think there's anybody that would pray with as much passion for their kids as a mama. The heart that they have for their children. Susanna Wesley, the mother of Charles and John Wesley, understood the value of that and also was able to overcome the challenges of a chaotic home. Susanna Wesley had 11 children. And the oxygen leaves the room. And she understood. She would go to her chair, and she would sit in her chair, and she would take her apron, she would put it over her head. And it became her own tent, her own place for her and God to spend some time together. And she would have her Bible, and she would spend her time praying. And the kids knew that when Mom was in that position, we don't interrupt. Unless something bad happened, we let her do her thing until she's free again, until she's out. And that was a normal thing for the Wesley children to see. One of the things we know is that Timothy saw the reality of God through the life of his mother. My Uncle Roland, when he was alive, he would pray for me every day. He told us that. And I remember the day he died, going back a few years now, the day he died, I had a thought hit me immediately that stunned me. And I remember sitting there and thinking, who will pray for me now? That was my first thought. Well, who's going to pray for me? Now, listen, I know I've got some people who pray for me. I know my family prays for me. But this is someone detached from me, my immediate family, who is passionate about going to God on my behalf every single day. And I sat there and I thought, I want that to be my kids and my wife's and my grandkids' first question when Grandpa's not here. But who's going to pray for me now? Who's going to do that? Grandmas and moms, mothers, they have the opportunity and privilege of being the very first missionary that a child will ever know and ever meet. And although you may not travel overseas and maybe you only travel from your room to the nursery, you are the first missionary. And the faith that you resemble and the faith that you show to your family has more power in it than any discipleship program the church has ever invented. It's an unbelievable design that God has put together. Eunice understood the value of the shadows, and she'll forever be remembered for her faith. Well, we also asked some mom advice, so let me just give some mom advice that you guys shared with us. I thought this was interesting, some good things. Some of them are serious, and some of them not so serious. So this one says, always say I love you in case they die. Okay, so this person's in here today, and I love that because we've always said the same thing. You say I love you, but in case they die. It was kind of like exclamation point. Sleep when the baby sleeps. Avoid sunburns. God knows more than you do. And smile lines are beautiful. Those are advice and things that Mom had said. 2 wrongs never make a right. Mom advice. Never judge another mother over the actions of their children. You never know what will happen in your own backyard. Right? Let's see. Make sure that when you leave the house, your underwear is clean in case you get in an accident. I've had that one before too, right? Critical. How about this one? Clean up the kitchen as you go, while you're cooking or while you're baking. And let's see. Get up, get dressed, and make dinner. That's good mom advice, right? Also, I had one more from within my family. There's always time to switch over the laundry before you leave the house. I don't even remember that one, but that was given to us. The third word I want to bring out this morning from our text is in verse number 5 is the word dwelt. Dwelt, not a word we use often to dwell with, but it's the idea of being comfortable or being at home with something. And Paul, writing to Timothy, says that I notice your mom and your grandma, when it comes to their faith, if it was a person, is very comfortable where it is. It's not awkward feeling, it's not weird, it's just natural. And as we look at that, we're thinking, in my mind, it speaks of consistency. And it's the idea that the heart of a mom anticipates the eternal. It understands that even though there's things that are monotonous and things that happen every single day, that all of these things, in light of eternity, can have value. They realize that life is short, but eternity is forever. Timothy's matriarchs left a pattern for him to follow. And the path that they carved for him, was a path that led him toward God. What we have to remember, and what we can celebrate in moms, is the fact that every response is an investment. Every kind word, every kind action is an investment in some way. I shared this before from this stage. I'm going to share it again for hopefully the last time. But my life's most embarrassing moment. So I was about 8 years old. I was playing baseball down in Charlotte, right near the lake. At this time, I was playing third base. I got to try all the different bases out. At some point, my dad was my coach. I don't think he was in this season. But I was playing third base, and it was near the end of the game, and I was standing there thinking, boy, I really got to go pee. 8 years old. So in my mind, I'm scanning the horizon. And I do see trees, but that's probably not the best place for me to do this right now. And I'm looking for what is the solution. And in my 8-year-old mind, I came up with a grand one. And this is what I thought to myself. If I let just a little bit out, the pressure won't be so bad. Obviously, you know what's going to happen if you've already started laughing at me. So I did. I started my process, and I thought I'd just let a little bit out. And as you know, it just couldn't stop. I mean, I emptied my bladder at third base. The dilemma now was, as I looked down and I had a yellow saddle type look, didn't look normal, it didn't feel normal, and I stood there thinking, oh no, now what? Brilliance hit me again, okay, 8 years old. I thought I'll cover it up. So I leaned over, grabbed a good handful of third base dirt, and I threw it across my front side. And I was horrified to realize that that was even worse than my first mistake, because now there was no hiding the fact that I had mud in a nice circle going around my midsection. I didn't even know what to do at this point. But I remember walking off the field, and I remember at the end of game, my mom walked right up to me and she handed me her folded chair, her lawn chair. Now, at first, what's going on? She handed it to me, but in her brilliance of not saying one word, but handing me the chair, what she was saying by saying nothing was, hold this in front of you and no one else will see the mistake that you made. And that's how I walked back to my vehicle, my parents' vehicle. I got into the car. There was not a conversation that I remember about my mistake. I got home, I took all that junk off and I threw it in a heap. And the next time I saw that pair of baseball pants, they were neatly folded in my drawer, not a stain on them, and they were ready for next week's baseball. I don't remember my mom saying one thing. She probably could have sat with me and been justified with teaching me a life lesson of how stupid that really was. But what my mom understood was, in the big scheme of things, Vinny already learned his lesson. Vinny didn't need another lesson right now. He just needed love. He needed acceptance. He needed to know that I still believe in him. And I think that if we could grasp the fact that every little thing that we do within our homes is an investment in the life of our children. Eunice understood that. Eunice knew that in the light of all the things that are going on, in the chaos of life, the consistency would speak more to Timothy than anything else she could say or teach. One of the prayers that I often pray for, well, up to this point, I have a new grandson, but with Conrad, I have a prayer book that I have written for him, and one of the things I pray for him regularly is this is how I have it. I said that Conrad would see the reality of Christ in the lifestyle of his mom and dad, in the daily stuff. That's what I desire to see. Someone once told me that you don't know how successful you are as a parent until you see your grandchildren walking with Christ. Somewhere along the line, we don't know the whole timeline, but Timothy grew up with a mom early on that knew Christ. 2 Timothy 3:15 says that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures. In the teaching as well as in the everyday, Timothy's mom Eunice was showing the reality of Jesus, helping Timothy to understand that God loved him and that God was real. Everything that a mom does speaks something into the life of their children. Timothy's mom, Eunice, will forever be remembered and as one who respected the mundane with genuine faith. She'll always be remembered as one who valued the shadows by living godly, and she'll always be remembered as one who anticipated the eternal by being consistent. Our worship team is returning, and we're going to sing a song, and I want to give you an opportunity to respond. And here's 3 applications I want to bring to you. Number 1, if we would take the goal on that God would say to us, they have done what they can. Moms, you don't have to impress anybody but God. And we can celebrate those who understand that. Just do what you can. Number 2, that the mundane does not mean that moments are wasted. Everything, every decision, every investment in the quiet moments of every day are an investment in the faith of our children. And then the last thing is that we can all have the heart of a mom. One who desperately wants to see God become real to the children that are around us, whether they're ours or someone else's, to protect their little young hearts, and to pray that God would reach them. We can all have the heart of a mom. As the worship team leads us, let me just say the altar is open. Let me encourage you. Maybe you need to come up and just talk to God about maybe how you've been with your mom. And maybe there's something that needs to be confessed. Maybe you want to come up and pray for your mom and just ask God's blessing on her in whatever way that is. You know your mom. The third thing that we can do is maybe there's someone in here that's not your mom, but you just want to encourage them. And you can go across the sanctuary into the next section or wherever it is and give them a hug and say, thanks for being a good mom. Thanks for being an example. Whatever it is that God is encouraging you and asking you to do, today is a day to celebrate the great things that mom has done and the great person that mom is. Let me pray, and we'll give you an opportunity to do that. Father,